Good morning. In today's session, we will look at the biography of William Butler Yeats, W.B. Yeats, whose poem, A Prayer for My Daughter, is prescribed for the students of English Literature, BA Part 3, Paper 1. Yeats was born on June 13, 1865, in Dublin, Ireland. In other words, Yeats was an Irishman. And he died on January 28, 1939, at Réquebrune, France. He was an Irish poet and dramatist. William Butler Yeats was an Irish poet and dramatist, meaning a playwright. Some think he was the greatest poet of the 20th century. He won the Nobel Prize for Literature in 1923. The works of W.B. Yeats form a bridge between the romantic poetry of the 19th century and the hard, clear language of modern poetry. The early years. William Butler Yeats, born on June 13, 1865 in Dublin, Ireland. He was the oldest of 4 children of John Butler Yeats, a portrait artist. His father added to William's formal schooling with lessons at home that gave him an enduring taste for the classics. John Yeats had a forceful personality. His personal philosophy was a blend of aestheticism and atheism. Aestheticism means a belief that art and beauty are important for everything. And atheism means a belief that there is no God. William felt its influence much later as it showed up in his interest in magic and the occult, meaning the supernatural sciences, and in his highly original system of aesthetics, meaning beauty. At the age of 19, Yeats enrolled in the Metropolitan School of Art in Dublin, intending to become a painter. In 1887, he became a literary correspondent for 2 American newspapers. Among his acquaintances at this time were his father's artist and writer friends, including William Morris, whose dates are 1834 to 1896, George Bernard Shaw, 1856 to 1950, and Oscar Wilde, 1856 to 1900. Poet and dramatist. Yeats' first book of poems, The Wanderings of Oisin and Other Poems, was published in 1889. In the long title poem, he began his celebration of the ancient Irish heroes Oisin, Finn, Angus, and St. Patrick. This interest was evident also in his collection of Irish folklore, fairy and folk tales, published in 1888. His long verse drama, The Countess Kathleen, published in 1892, was a combination of modern dramatic forms with ancient beliefs and modern Irish history. He followed this with his collection of romantic tales and mood sketches, The Celtic Twilight, published in 1893. Yeats's Secret Rose, publication 1897, includes poems that he called personal, occult, and Irish. More figures from ancient Irish history and legend appeared in this volume. The Wind Among the Reeds, 1899, won the Royal Academy Prize as the best book of poems published that year. The Abbey Theatre. An important milestone in the history of the modern theatre occurred in 1902 when Yeats, Maud Gonne, Douglas Hyde, and George Russell founded the Irish National Theatre Society, out of which grew the Abbey Theatre Company in 1904. Yeats's experience with the theatre gave to his volume of poems In the Seven Woods, 1907, a new style. It was less elaborate, less romantic, and more straightforward in language and imagery. Some of Yeats' plays show his great interest in ancient royalty and half forgotten things, but his poetry was unmistakably new. Yeats' play At the Hawk's Well, written and produced in 1915, showed the influence of Japanese no drama in its use of masks and in its dances by a Japanese choreographer. From 1918 to 1923, Yeats and his wife lived in a restored tower at Ballylee, that is in Galway, Ireland. The tower became a prominent symbol in his best poems, notably those that make up The Tower, published in 1928. Yeats was elected an Irish senator in 1922, a post he filled until his retirement in 1928. He received the Nobel Prize in Literature in 1923. His acceptance of the role and its responsibilities had been foreshadowed, meaning predicted, in his poems Responsibilities, published in 1914. The outbreak of civil war in Ireland in 1922 had heightened his conviction, that is, his belief, that the artist must lead the way through art rather than through politics to a harmonious ordering of chaos, aesthetic theories, and systems. Yeats devised his doctrine of the mask as a means of presenting very personal thoughts and experiences to the world without danger of sentimentality, that is, excessive emotions. By discovering the kind of man who would be his exact opposite, Yeats believed he could then put on the mask of this ideal anti-self and thus produce art from the synthesis, meaning from the combination of opposing natures. For this reason, his poetry is often structured on paired opposites, as in Sailing to Byzantium. Yeats turned to magic for the illogical system that would oppose his complete his art. He drew upon Buddhism, an ancient Eastern religion, as well as upon Jewish and Christian mystic, that is, spiritual books, to try and capture what he thought was a harmony of the opposite elements of life. Yeats believed that history was cyclical, meaning circular, and that every 2000 years a new cycle, which is the opposite of the cycle that has preceded it, begins. In his poem, The Second Coming, the birth of Christ begins one cycle, which ends as the poem ends, with a rough beast, mysterious and menacing, who slouches towards Bethlehem to be born. His last works. Yeats' last play were Purgatory, 1938, and The Death of Cuchulainn, 1938 again. He died in Roquebrune, France on January 28, 1929. He had retired there because of ill health. He had the lines of one of his poems engraved on his tombstone in Ireland. Cast a cold eye on life, on death, horseman, pass by. Yeats was not only one of the greatest poets and a major figure in the Irish literary renaissance, which means rebirth, but also wrote some of the greatest of all 20th century literature. This is all about the biography of William Butler Yeats. Thank you.